Welcome to the TenNet Indigenous Wisdom Research Center. I am your host, author Tenet Sategn. In this broadcast series, we explore the profound mysteries within our research. Ethiopian esoteric philosophy and alchemy. Our journey into channeling hidden wisdom begins now.
Welcome to the debate. When we observe the natural world, we often just take for granted the sheer, absolute violence of transformation.
Oh, absolutely. It's not pretty.
No, it's really not. We look at, say, a caterpillar entering a chrysalis, and we think of it as this peaceful, inevitable sequence, like a biological bedtime story.
Right, just taking a nap and waking up with wings.
Exactly. But inside that cocoon, the caterpillar isn't just growing wings. It is fundamentally dissolving.
Yeah, it turns into literal goo.
Right. Its entire structural identity is being broken down by enzymes to build something completely new. It is an absolute existential dissolution. The old organism has to end for the new one to begin. And today, we're taking that biological reality and applying it to the human soul.
Which is a heavy pivot, but a necessary one.
It is, because the philosophy we're examining today posits a really profound and, frankly, unsettling purpose for human existence. It argues we are not here merely to live, die, and, be recycled back into the Earth's food chain.
Right.
We are meant to undergo a radical, permanent transformation, an existential emigration from our current state into a completely new ontological reality.
Becoming the butterfly, basically.
Yes. And the central question we are exploring today is, what is the true catalyst for that transformation?
That's the core of it.
Right. Is it a strict adherence to a historical, text-based framework, what is often called the gospel or the written record? Or is it a lived, real-time mystical union and experiential covenant known as the Kidan? And for my part, I'll be arguing that historical text-based frameworks are the absolute safest and most democratic path to understanding this transformation.
And I will be taking the opposite stance. I'll be arguing for the absolute primacy of real-time, experiential, spiritual covenants, the Kidan, as literally the only true vehicle for this kind of transformation. It's a fascinating tension, honestly, and the stakes couldn't be higher.
They really couldn't.
Because, if you get the catalyst wrong, you don't just miss out on a neat spiritual experience, you fail your existential purpose entirely.
Right. Which is why I find myself so strongly defending the historical text-based frameworks here. To me, they're not just, necessary. They provide a verifiable blueprint. They protect us from the sheer chaos of unanchored mysticism.
I hear the appeal of safety, I really do, but I come at it from a different way. Relying on texts and historical frameworks is essentially clinging to a dead letter.
A dead letter?
Yeah. If we want true transformation, it requires the Kidan. That real-time experiential covenant is the only way to become something fundamentally new. You can't read your way into being a butterfly.
Well, let's lay the groundwork for why safety is even a concern here in the first place. Because when you look at this worldview, it presents a very sobering reality about what it calls the spiritual food chain.
Oh yes, this is where it gets intense.
It really does. In the physical world, the mechanics are obvious, right? A lion eats a gazelle, and eventually the earth consumes the lion. It's a closed loop of consumption. But the assertion here is that the unseen spiritual world operates on a very similar predatory logic.
Right, it's not just about bad vibes or negative energy.
No, exactly. We are talking about unseen forces, predatory spirits that literally feed on human energy and devotion. So if a person engages in unchecked, naive mystical exploration,
They think they're talking to God.
right, they think they're communicating with the divine, but they are actually opening themselves up to having their consciousness overwritten or consumed by an entity.
Which is terrifying.
It is.
I see what you're saying, but
Just to finish a thought, by relying on the documented, vetted histories of great spiritual figures, we have a verifiable path. It protects the masses against the predatory mechanics of the unseen world.
The mechanics of that spiritual food chain are terrifying, I agree with you there. But my position is that a text-based approach is fundamentally incapable of producing actual transformation. It's, well, it's basically an avoidance strategy.
An avoidance strategy?
Yeah, there's a brilliant analogy in the source material regarding marriage that illustrates this perfectly. Relying entirely on historical texts is like a couple attempting to live out their marriage by exclusively reading their marriage certificate.
Okay.
Right? Like, yes, the paper has the rules, yes, it has the signatures, but it completely lacks the live broadcast, the actual breathing reality of unity and love.
Well, sure, the paper is static.
Exactly. It's static. To achieve true transformation, you require the Kidan. This is a real-time, living merger with higher realities, what the text refers to as the living ones or Heewanun.
So you're saying the text is just the description of the thing, it's not the thing itself.
Exactly. Without that live, esoteric covenant, you are just reading the user manual for an operating system you never actually install. To use a technological analogy, reading the manual doesn't update your hardware. The Kidan is the actual download. It's the software update that rewrites your internal code.
Okay, but relying entirely on an internal mystical download is incredibly dangerous. What happens when the feelings of unity fluctuate, which they will?
Well, this brings us to where true morality actually resides, I think. If morality relies entirely on a subjective, internal feeling of being connected to a spirit, what keeps a society functional when that feeling inevitably fades?
See, the problem with text-based morality is that it is inherently flawed because it relies 100% on external enforcement. External enforcement is what keeps people from stealing from each other.
But let's go back to that marriage contract analogy. A man who is bound to his partner only by the legal parameters of a written contract, he can still harbor an intense desire to cheat.
Sure.
And frankly, he will cheat, provided he thinks the public or the law won't catch him. The text doesn't change his nature, it only modifies his risk assessment.
He takes off his ring when he goes on a business trip, right?
Exactly. But a man who exists in a true Kidan, a lived, experiential covenant of unity, he has no internal desire to betray his partner. The thought genuinely wouldn't even cross his mind because his essence is merged with hers.
I mean, ideally, yes.
Therefore, only the experiential Kidan provides genuine moral transformation. The text just creates well-behaved actors. The Kidan creates a new type of human.
I see why you think that, but let me give you a slightly different perspective. Isn't the written contract the very scaffolding that protects the vulnerable when human nature and human emotions inevitably fail?
I don't think they fail if the Kidan is real.
But human emotions, even profound spiritual ones, are volatile. You say the Kidan changes internal desire, but we have to look at the dark side of these lived covenants. Look at the description of the Taweos, the traditional ancestral spirit covenants.
Well, hold on. The Taweos is a very specific traditional application.
Yes, but it is a live covenant. It's exactly the kind of experiential merger you are talking about. And how does it enforce morality?
Well, it's
Through immediate, terrifying retribution. Let's unpack how this actually works in practice, because it's wild. In the Tao system, if a corrupt judge takes a bribe and violates the covenant, he doesn't just feel guilty. The unseen world reacts instantly.
right.
His livestock drop dead before he even reaches his house. Or worse, the punishment cascades into a biological 7-generation curse affecting his grandchildren.
It's severe, yes.
So I have to ask, is a system driven by the immediate mystical terror of having your family cursed truly a higher morality? I argue it's not. A shared, rational, text-based legal code allows for due process. It allows for learning, for grace. The text protects us from the totalitarianism of spirits that just punish first and never ask questions.
That is a very compelling argument, I'll give you that. But have you considered the critical distinction between the lower Taos covenants and the higher Kidan with the living ones?
I mean, they operate on the same basic mechanism, don't they?
Not really. You're pointing to the Taos, which operates essentially as the middle management of the unseen world.
Middle management. That's a good way to put it.
Right? And yes, those traditional spirit covenants rely on immediate, brutal retribution. But look at what it proves. It proves that the mechanics work.
That the spirits exist, you mean?
Yes! It proves the unseen world can and does interact with our reality in real time. It enforces an ontological reality. The goal isn't to stay trapped in the Taoist system. The goal is to elevate to the Kidan to the highest level, merging with the Heewanun, the Immortals, where the motivation is pure unity, not fear.
My concern is what happens in the meantime.
What happens in the meantime with the text is that the scaffolding replaces the building.
How so?
When you rely solely on the text, there is no real-time judge. If someone steals from a church collection box under a purely text-based system, nothing happens to them unless the public catches them on a security camera. The morality is entirely hollowed out.
Right.
The Taoos, for all its harshness, actually prevents the theft because the ontological reality of the covenant is palpably present.
See, I think your dismissal of the public's role ignores the sociological genius of democratized religion. A text-based approach is fundamentally democratic.
Democratic, sure, but is it effective?
Yes. When you look at modern religious institutions, they are often run by the public, by parish councils, by everyday people who are elected or appointed from the community. And I argue that this is a protective feature, not a bug.
A protective feature? I mean, when everyday committees take over, it's usually a disaster for true spiritual progress.
I completely disagree. It is the ultimate protection against spiritual tyranny.
How?
Because when the public runs the institution based on a shared accessible text, it protects the community from rogue mystics who claim to have direct, unassailable authority from unseen spirits.
Well, they might actually have that authority, though.
But how do you verify it? If a leader stands up and says, "The Spirit told me to take your land," the community can point to the written text and say, "No, the text says, 'Thou shalt not steal.'"
Okay, yes, it provides a rule book.
Right? If everything requires an esoteric Kidan that only a few can access, you create an incredibly dangerous spiritual oligarchy. A written gospel can be read by a farmer, a teacher, a child. It is a democratization of salvation.
I'm sorry, but I just don't buy that.
Why not?
Let me tell you why. Democratizing the instructions for a complex surgery doesn't mean the general public can successfully perform the surgery in their living rooms.
That's a bit of an extreme comparison.
But it's accurate. There is an analogy used in this philosophy regarding emigrating to America. You cannot get to America just by having a committee of people sitting in a room reading a brochure about how great New York is.
Okay, obviously not.
You need to follow the exact esoteric, bureaucratic processes. You need a passport. You need to go to the embassy. You need the visa. You need clearance. It is a highly specific, rigorous mechanism.
Right, but the embassy's rules are written down. They are a text.
Yes, but the text isn't the border. The text isn't the airplane. You can't just read the immigration laws and magically declare yourself an American citizen. You have to go through the lived process.
Sure, but
And when the public who completely lacks this esoteric, mystical knowledge runs the institution, what do they actually accomplish? They just build empty buildings. The term uses waina, empty, hollow spaces.
like megachurches?
Exactly. They build these massive structures to compete with one another, arguing over whose empty building has better architecture, but the presence, the Kidan, is entirely absent.
Wow.
True transformation requires an elite, lived pursuit of hidden truth. It might require extreme dedication, like fasting and isolation for 40 days to attune your consciousness to the right frequency. You simply cannot vote your way into an existential transformation through a parish council.
I'm just not convinced by that line of reasoning because it writes off the vast majority of human beings.
It's hard truth, though.
But if the only way to escape the spiritual food chain is to engage in a 40-day esoteric fast to contact immortals, then 99.9% of humanity is doomed. The text-based historical framework offers profound mercy.
Mercy, maybe, but not transformation.
It says, look at the lives of those who did achieve greatness. Read their histories, their giddel, or acts. Emulate their moral choices. You don't need to literally summon their spirits. You need to follow the blueprint they left behind.
Following a blueprint of a butterfly doesn't give a caterpillar wings, though. It just makes for a very well-educated caterpillar.
That's a great line. But
This is exactly why relying purely on text results in a society that endlessly debates history instead of experiencing reality.
which actually brings up a major point of friction for me regarding how we treat history in this framework. Because I know what our listeners are probably thinking right now. My own skeptical alarm bells are definitely ringing.
Oh, I'm sure.
This starts to sound a lot like ghost hunting.
Ghost hunting? Seriously?
Hear me out. There's this intense focus on physical journeys to places like the rock-hewn churches of Lalibela, specifically to seek out the living ones.
Right.
These are figures like Yared or Libanos, whom the philosophy suggests bypassed death entirely and still exist in real time, hidden in these sacred spaces. I find this approach highly problematic.
Why? Because it takes the spiritual reality seriously?
Because treating magnificent physical historical sites merely as hiding places for literal immortal beings completely undermines the profound human achievements of those who actually built them.
I don't see it that way.
But the builders of Lalibela were brilliant architects. They were engineers and theologians. When we study the history of their engineering, the cultural context of their era, we gain grounded, rational lessons.
Sure.
When we treat them as immortal ghosts waiting in the walls to give us real-time mystical instructions, we abandon the rational appreciation of human achievement for a mystical scavenger hunt.
That's an interesting point, though I would frame it very differently. Why are you so determined to settle for studying the empty cocoon?
Because the cocoon is real, it's tangible, we can learn from it.
But it's just the residue. If the original architects of Lalibela actually achieved a higher state of being, if they successfully completed the transformation and updated their ontological software, why would we restrict ourselves to carbon dating the silk they left behind?
Because it's verifiable.
I want to dig into why modern society does this. We obsess over history, we carbon date the silk because we are terrified of the vulnerability required for actual present-day spiritual transformation.
I think we obsess over history because it's the only way to establish shared facts.
But look at what it does to us. This worldview makes a profound diagnosis of our modern cultural neuroses. It argues that our current societal conflicts and our endless divisions stem exactly from this obsession with past historical narratives.
Okay, I'm listening.
We weaponize text and history against each other. My text says my ancestors owned this land in the 13th century. No, my text says my ancestors were here first.
That is definitely true.
It is an endless loop of caterpillars arguing over who has the better memory of the dirt. If we could tap into the Kidan, the living essence of these higher states, we would transcend those historical squabbles entirely. We would have real-time access to the profound wisdom that built those structures in the first place, rather than just fighting over who holds the deed to the ruins.
You were assuming that the Kidan, with these unseen forces, will inherently bring peace and clarity. But let's go back to the mechanics we established earlier. The unseen world is predatory.
It can be, yes.
Right. So if you abandon the text, the agreed-upon historical framework, what mechanism do you have to verify that the living one you are speaking to in a cave in Lalibela is actually Yared, and not one of those predatory spirits looking to consume your soul?
The Kidan itself carries its own frequency, its own verification of truth.
But that's entirely subjective. The text is the only objective metric we have to test the spirits. If an esoteric experience contradicts the established written record, the text protects us from being deceived. It is the ultimate firewall.
A firewall that blocks the internet entirely isn't protecting your computer, though. It's rendering it useless.
It keeps out the viruses.
The text can't protect you from a spiritual predator any more than a restaurant menu can protect you from a starving lion.
Okay, that's a vivid image.
There's a story that addresses this exact verification problem. An individual goes to Lalibela, deeply seeking the living ones. He encounters the institutional gatekeepers, the priests, the people guarding the text.
Right.
And they tell him, you aren't qualified to seek the living ones. Read the journal. Read the history. Stick to the book.
Which sounds like a sensible precaution.
But his response is heartbreakingly honest. He looks at them and says, I have read the history, and my neck is still bowed. I am still defeated.
Oh, wow.
The text did not liberate him. He realizes that only direct contact, a lived Kidan, can actually break the cycle of his suffering. Yes, there is immense risk. The spiritual food chain is dangerous, but staying safely inside the text means accepting a slow, comfortable death of spiritual irrelevance. It guarantees you will never transform.
Well, I think it guarantees survival. And in a universe as dangerous as the one we are discussing, survival through shared, democratic, text-based rules is a monumental human achievement.
Survival isn't enough, though.
The written word allows a society to build generation over generation without having to reestablish a dangerous mystical connection from scratch every single time a leader dies.
But survival is not transformation. A caterpillar that successfully avoids being eaten by a bird has survived, yes, but if it never enters the chrysalis because it's too afraid of the dissolution process, it dies a caterpillar. It failed its entire biological and existential purpose.
This has been a deeply challenging conversation. Let's try to summarize where we've landed.
Sure.
I maintain that historical texts and structured rules, the written frameworks and gospels, provide a necessary, safe, and democratic blueprint. They are the scaffolding that allows society to function. They protect human beings from the chaotic, predatory mechanics of the unseen world and from the elitism of rogue mystics. A shared, text-based moral reality gives us a system of grace and due process. Rather than leaving us at the mercy of the terrifying immediate retribution of spirits or the exclusive, esoteric quests of a privileged few.
And my position remains that a blueprint, no matter how safe, democratic, or meticulously detailed, is not a house.
Right.
Without the Kidan, the live, real-time, experiential, download and union with higher realities, we are merely memorizing the dimensions of a home we will never actually live in. The text is just a historical record of someone else's transformation.
Someone else's blueprint.
Exactly. True evolution requires stepping beyond the safety of the page, risking the vulnerability of the present moment, and entering into a living covenant that radically rewrites our internal nature.
Well, despite our deep disagreement over the method, I think it's clear we both converge on the profound underlying premise of this philosophy. We both agree that humanity's ultimate goal is a radical transformation.
Absolutely. We are not meant to remain in this mere material cycle of consuming, accumulating, and ultimately being consumed by the earth.
We just profoundly disagree on the vehicle for that escape. Is it the reliable, communal map of the text, or the perilous, lived journey of the esoteric covenant?
It is the ultimate question of the map versus the territory.
Exactly. And that leaves us with so much more to explore regarding the mechanics of the unseen world and the true limits of human potential.
For sure. There's a lot to unpack there.
We want to leave you, our listeners, with this thought. Take a moment to examine the foundation of your own worldview. Are you navigating your life by reading the blueprints of past contracts? Or are you stepping into the dissolution and vulnerability of a living covenant? When you look at your own moral and spiritual architecture, are you just a very well-educated caterpillar? Or are you actually preparing for the chrysalis?
A terrifying but absolutely necessary question.
Until next time.